Oh, hey.
All right, I think we're all here.
Great. Okay. So, are we doing the Pledge of Allegiance? I can't remember if we did that last time or not.
You know, we tried last time. I think it was it didn't go over very well. It was a little,
Okay.
it was a little
Got
out of
it.
sync.
We could try
I
it.
don't have a flag in front of me at the moment.
All right. All right. So we are going to forgo the flag salute and call the meeting to order at 5:33. And public comment for items not on the agenda. This item is reserved for persons wishing to provide comment to the board on any I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. I had background feedback from my computer because I'm on my computer and my phone. So I'm going back to the public comment section here. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be at the time the matter is called. Public comments from members of the public that are read at this meeting will be limited to 300 words. So do we have any public comment at this time? Do you know, Brian, if anybody has provided any public comment, or Ashley?
We have not received any public comment for this meeting.
Okay, great. And as far as we know, there isn't any public comment. Do people have a way of commenting live during this meeting?
Yeah, they could email the clerk, and thus far we have not received anything.
Okay, can you, Ashley, just reiterate what that email is for people?
That email is Butte Choice Energy, COB@buttecounty.net.
Perfect, thank you. So moving on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 13th, 2020 board meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Ashley, would you do the roll call?
Director Brown,
Aye.
Director Huber,
Aye.
Director Teeter,
Aye.
and Director Lucero.
Aye.
And just a little
carried.
housekeeping, I think we probably should have done a roll call to see who was here, but if everyone's happy with having it suffice by that last roll call vote, we can just roll with it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What, you have to do a roll call vote on every item? It just, because it's a telephonic meeting.
No, I just
So-
meant the
so
roll
each-
call at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, you don't have to do, I mean, you don't have to do a roll call of who's present, but that's not a bad idea. But you do have to do a roll call vote for every item that's on the agenda.
Yep, understand.
Okay, so does that mean under A, we would go through like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all those items, or do we take A as a whole?
I believe we
It's the
can.
board's choice how you want to go forward with that. So you can do it
Okay,
all
well,
at once, or you can do it individually.
Okay. Well, there's just so many items stacked in there that I think we should probably, since there's only 4 of us, we can just go ahead and, if everybody's comfortable with it, we can just go ahead and do a roll call at the end. Just write down your questions that you may have about any of the items, and we'll just roll through all of the items, and you can ask as we go along. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah, and I believe on this
Sure.
item, we're just providing, it's for information only, so I don't believe there'll be any direction that's needed, but certainly I think we can entertain questions as we go through each one.
Okay. So on the regular agenda, item A is the operations and administrative report from interim executive officers. receive updates on various operational and administrative activities, and file with this report. Topics include the following: BCE financial update. Who's going to give that one?
I will kick this off, and this is Brian Ring, interim executive director from Butte County. And at the last board meeting, we discussed our expenses year to date, and so we've been tracking all of our costs for all of our consultants, and we've also now added in some costs for labor from the county's perspective and also from the city of Chico. So we have all of our costs to date, and again, the first item on the spreadsheet there, the $85,000 was what was expended for the feasibility study, and then we had an implementation plan filing that was due at the end of last calendar year, and then everything below that has been expenses that year to date for 2020 that are associated with the preparation for launch. And again, this is traditional for a CCA to go through. Obviously, there's expenditures that need to be made, contracts that need to be reached before the launch, and obviously revenues won't be coming in until after that first phase of launch in spring of 2021. But we did add in the labors, so you can see it's roughly $52,000 from the county so far year to date, and obviously we've had our county council was a member. He was an interim general counsel for the CCA up until we got BBK on board. And we have Ashley Snyder, who's our clerk, and myself, and we've had some other staff that have been associated. That's why that number's obviously significantly higher than that of the city of Chico, which is about 7,500 year to date.
Yep, and that's just my time. This is Eric for the city of Chico time spent this year to date on Beat Choice Energy.
And the reason
great.
it's important to have these on here is just the cooperative service agreement states that all these costs that are expended by the city and the county pre-launch will be recovered by the city and the county post-launch. So that's why it's so critical for us to keep track of all these expenses.
All right. Are there any questions from the board on the first item? Oh,
I
hearing
just have
none.
a
we're
quick
gonna-
question, Brian.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Brian, or does it look to you as though these, what we paid out to date, does that sort of match what our expectations were for what we would have paid to this date?
Absolutely. I mean, there's going to be costs associated with just getting us with the technical experts that are needed to help us navigate through here. So I think, the county and the city both had committed $300,000 each, and it still is Eric's goal and my goal to not have to go down that road. So we're doing everything possible to actually not have to expend that. So that's our goal. So I think so far year to date, I think we're looking fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 2, BCE contract update.
All right. So thus far, and forgive me. I think there's a delay when I changed the slides here for the visual on YouTube. But we at the last board meeting we received direction with regards to all of our contracts with Calpine for data management, Z Global for scheduling, and Pilot Power Group (PPG) for our power services providers. I'm happy to report out that the direction we received, we were able to attain contracts with all 3 of those entities through June 30th of 2023. So all 3 of those organizations are signed and on board to help us proceed with launch. And some of them won't have as much work to do now, but towards the end of the year, and obviously as we start to look at power, obviously they each play a different role. But we do have those provided now, and we're going to use them. They're obviously they work in the CCA industry, so they have a tremendous amount of support they can provide for us. So a couple things that each one of them is going to be working on is providing the CCA with any key tasks, just to make sure we have a good timeline of issues and events that need to be done and tracked through the end of the year and all pre-launch. And Pilot Power Group (PPG) is also going to be working on a couple things for us. One of them is a risk management policy that we hope to bring before your board at the next meeting for discussion. And the risk management policy has to deal with risks associated with procuring energy. So it's going to be a good discussion that they're going to be working on drafting some comments and some draft language for that. And they're also going to be working on a integrated resource plan, an IRP filing, which I believe is due now the end of September of this calendar year, so they're going to be helping us with that as well. Happy to report as well, I know at the last board meeting that the request was from Calpine. Again, Calpine's going to be the data manager, to have a call center or call center staff working out of this region, and they were very receptive to that. They don't anticipate it being too large of a staff. Right now they have a lot of their call center staff working actually remotely, obviously with COVID-19 in place, but they were very receptive to the idea of having a call center appear. So I know Eric and I will be talking in a few minutes about the potential for office space and locations, but one component could be to include a few people working in a call center, even sharing space with BCE.
Okay. Is there entertainment of the idea of existing call centers in town that, do piecemeal work? Or is this something that would be specialty and they would be employees, and so it would be a different kind of setup?
I could jump in. This is Eric. From my perspective, I think it's going to be specialized employees that are familiar with the energy industry and understand community choice aggregation scenarios. So I would assume they will be Calpine employees from everything we've been told up to this point. But we'll definitely pose that question in some of our next conversations with Calpine representatives.
I do think that this is from Lena. I do think there's some flexibility, and obviously, further conversation to be had about that. They've done it in a couple of different ways, so we can follow up on that one.
Yeah, this is Gary Saliba. The conversation with Calpine so far has been to hire local people and have them be Calpine employees.
Okay. All right. Is that it on that point, Brian?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so moving on to item 3, PG&E matters related to BCE implementation.
Yeah, so another milestone was reached during the past few weeks. The service agreement within PG&E was reviewed and signed and delivered to PG&E, as well as the draft customer notification, and hopefully you see that in your packet. We did receive some feedback at the last board meeting as well to try to add some graphics to that, so we did attempt to do that. So as you can see, if you have input on that, we can certainly take that. We do have time to still massage that document, but we did try to attempt to add some graphics there to make it more visually pleasing to our residents and community members who are going to be getting this opt-out information once we start sending out mailers.
Does anybody have any comments on that item?
I thought that.
Go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead, Scott.
I thought that draft customer notification letter turned out great. I had asked that sort of a succinct condensing of the information appear somewhere in there to make it easy for people to be drawn into the letter, and I thought that you guys did a great job of doing that with that blue highlighted box at the beginning of the letter.
Great.
So I do have one comment. I was thinking, I like the way that you broke it up with shaded boxes to break up the copy, but I noticed that you still have about a half a page on the second page left. One of the things I thought is it might be useful to put bullet points. Bullet points are easier to read, especially when you're reading across an entire page like that. Sometimes just having indentation and some bullet points makes it easier. So that's just a little feedback on just making it easier on the eyes and not so much heavy copy. It gives a little white space and it's psychologically easier to read.
Okay. Yeah,
The other thing worth pointing out here, guys, is that once the marketing firm is on board, which we anticipate this summer, and we have a logo and a style guide and all the rest of it, this probably will be reconfigured to include your good feedback, and then most of the text fence here is required. So we have some flexibility, but not a lot. So this
Okay.
will have enough before it goes out. We have quite a while to work on it.
Great. Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments on item 3? Okay, so item 4, CPUC bond.
Okay, and this is a quick one, but Calpine did submit a $100,000 bond to the CPUC on our behalf. That should be, I just noticed there's a little missing a zero in the slide, but that's 100,000, not 10,000, and not some other number. $100,000 on behalf of a BCE, and which was a good agreement that we had with them, and this would require 2% interest to be repaid within 90 days of our launch once service has been provided, once service starts. So again, this is one of those areas where the county and the city didn't have to expend that $100,000. Calpine did it on our behalf.
Okay, great. Are there any questions from the board on that matter? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 5, the executive search update.
Okay, on this one, and we're going to go a little bit more detail here later on, but so 16 candidates. Now, I know when we initially posted this last week, I think we had 13 candidates to date, but 16 as of closing. And again, the closing, it was last Friday, May 8th. The idea here is to do some screening within our technical experts. We obviously, our contractor is going to do some screening as well. Our goal is to have interviews first round interviews on May 27th, and then ultimately bring 1 to 3 candidates. We'll see how they separate themselves. 1 to 3 candidates before the board at the June meeting. Certainly had the flexibility to have another interview process mid-June or for the special meeting if that's necessary, but if not, if there's a clear number 1 candidate, we can hopefully get some direction to try to work out a deal with that candidate and bring a contract before the board at the July meeting and have that person start potentially in August. So that's kind of a quick timeline here, and I want to allow Sean to chime in here on anything from Lean Energy that I missed.
No, you got it all. I think the only thing worth noting that I learned from Avery and Associates, as you all know, is leading the recruitment on this. Our recruiter did indicate today that there are a couple of folks that they will be directly reaching out to this week who did not submit applications. They thought that they might, and they're from regional public power agencies. So hopefully there may be a few more that come in this week that are more targeted applicants.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions on that? I know we're going to go into a little bit deeper later in the meeting.
So is any action needed in order for us to extend the time period if they're going to continue to recruit after the close date?
Good
I
question.
don't believe so. That's part of the scope of work that they had laid out and was approved, but perhaps Harriet wants to opine on that.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine on that right now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to item 6, BCE expansion marketing RFP.
Yeah, so this is one we're gonna be talking a little bit later on about a proposed policy to help the board consider new entrants into the CCA. Thus far, again, the city of Orrville has expressed an interest to us, and I've reached out to them recently, and I still need to get a hold of them again to see if they're very serious in this. So if they are, it would be nice to have a policy in place for the board to use as a guideline to help consider this, adding the city of Orrville or frankly any other entity that within the region or even outside the region that might make a request before your board for consideration. So we will be doing that, talking about that a little bit more more detailed later on tonight. And the marketing RFP will be issued, I believe as Sean just mentioned here, next week, I believe. Or is it this week, Sean?
This week.
This week.
I think it should go out this week.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the next item.
Yeah,
the Cal CCA engagement.
Yeah, the last 2 items are pretty Just quick updates. BCE is now a member of the California Community Choice Aggregation membership. So there's a number of opportunities to partake in calls. Actually, there's a couple a week, it seems like. So lots of opportunities to stay engaged and stay active. Obviously, this entity has a huge group that does a lot for regulatory issues, so which is great for us because then BCE doesn't have to expend the resources right now because Cal CCA does a lot of that on behalf of the CCA. So it's a good organization to belong to, so we're starting to get engaged with that. And then the last one there is just some formalities that we needed to get done. Our employee ID number, our EIN, tax ID application, got that completed last week. Our JPA, I did check with the Secretary of State. It's been received. Everything is fine there. And we're also just starting to have some discussions on looking at liability insurance options. So just some kind of housekeeping things we wanted to make sure the board was aware of.
Okay. All right. Any questions on any of those items? I do have one question on this Cal CCA engagement. How many members are in that group?
I would say just about every CCA within the state. So
Every CCA.
I believe, and Sean or Gary could
21.
probably correct me, but I'm guessing 20?
21.
21, okay.
And then
21
there are
members?
a number of, yes, and then there are a number of associate members that have not yet launched service or are investigating CCA. So it's a mix, and then there's an element or a section of membership that they're called partners, which would be organizations like ours and Gary's and others that are vendors to the CCA community.
Okay, cool. And I suppose they have like an annual meeting and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, they do.
Okay. I'm curious. I'm curious about it. So anyway.
Yeah,
Thank you.
They had a call a couple weeks ago just for new CCAs that are in the process of launching that I listened in on, which was great because there were 6 or 7 actually new ones. So it's kind of it was called a new director, I think, call. So I think they're going to have a call monthly for CCAs that are just launching. So similar CCAs such as ours that are in the same different phase, and obviously the ones that have been successful for the past number of years. So yeah, it seemed like a great organization to be a part of.
All right. So we're just receiving this for information, and it doesn't sound like you really need any direction except perhaps on the executive search, and we're going to come back to that. Is that correct?
Actually, I think we're good on the executive search. Unless there's question for
Okay.
We have a closed session afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on with the regular agenda, item B, discussion regarding the BCEA office space. The requested action is provide feedback and direction to interim executive officer regarding options for BCEA office location and lease beginning in August 2020.
Yeah, so this is a
Can I ask you
discussion.
a quick question before we get started on that?
You bet.
Is there any issue with conflict of interest given that there's a City of Chico property on this report?
No, I don't think so.
Thank
You
you.
don't have, this is the city itself, that you don't have any personal interest in any of these properties. So that would be the only reason that you would have a conflict.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so
Okay.
so Eric and I started to discuss the options. Obviously, as we start thinking about hiring an executive officer, the executive officer is going to need a place to work and ultimately a place to build the BCE team. So, a few of the ideas that we were throwing around here internally was the BCAG facility that we currently are hosting our board meetings at is a great facility. I did check with their director, and unfortunately, they do not have any space. The county, I looked into the county as well, and the county is very limited on space right now that we have available. We just actually were doing a little bit of I don't want to say just a more expanded search to find some space for the ROE tree processing center. So again, space is somewhat limited from the county facilities. the city of Chico, and talking with Eric, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but they have some space right now in their city hall, and also the old municipal building could be a viable option. And I'll turn it over to Eric just to speak a little more on that.
Correct, yeah. We've looked and kind of brainstormed for a while to find an appropriate location to house BCEA staff, and understanding initially it'd be a CAO, maybe an admin person, and it'll grow a little bit from there. We kind of, the first opportunity would be in our old municipal building on the first floor, on the kind of, if you're looking towards 4th Street, which would be west. There's some office space available at about 1,500 square feet, just under 1,500 square feet, and there's a bit of a counter space window there that's available as well that would be conducive to BCEA, daily interactions. We potentially could have some space in our city hall too, down the road. Not quite sure, but at this point, the old municipal building would be kind of the most appropriate that we have in our inventory. And so I think we're just looking for feedback if in the city of Chico somewhere, if it'd be appropriate to look for office space, or if we should look for office space or available space elsewhere.
Yeah, and ultimately, we're looking at an organization that's probably going to be around 6, 7, 8 employees, ultimately. And again, we also were looking at see if there's an interest to have us look more privately owned office space, either in the city of Chico or an incorporated area. While we're talking about it, the city of Chico may be a viable. Just with the space that the city currently has available, we're guesstimating it's going to be somewhere in the $1.50 to $2 a square foot, but that's just a rough estimate right now. As far as what office space will cost. But we wanted to see if there was any direction from the board with regards to us to look in specific areas that you would feel this office space would be more appropriate to be housed. We're obviously just looking for some input from you folks.
Sure, this is Scott. It seems to me that the old municipal building is appropriately situated, and it's a substantial building. I think it has all the right characteristics.
This is Alex.
What about,
oh, go ahead, Alex. Sorry about that. I would agree. I think the space is totally appropriate.
This is Deborah. So I'm just wondering about if we do a call center out of there, is the technology there for that kind of thing?
There is. Currently, our IS department is occupying the other space, kind of on the eastern side. So we have ample data connections and networking capabilities there. So it would be able to house a call center. We may have to do some telephone related items, but I think we could make it work quite easily.
Okay. So what would, how do you feel about it, Doug?
Thank you for asking. I think the parking's my biggest hang up with Chico's municipal center. Erica, what kind of parking would be available to the staff that would be renting there, as well as the public?
Yeah, that's a great question. Parking's always a challenge in our downtown corridor. We would look at probably leasing spots on the Flume Street side of our municipal parking lot. Currently, our municipal parking lot is quite full on a normal business day, even with visitors. There's some capacity there, but very minimal. But we could look at and propose, leasing, like an annual lease, parking spaces very close on the same block. Would be the Flume Street side, the diagonal parking.
Thank you for that information. I think, knowing that it's always been kind of problematic for parking, I'd at least like to give direction that we look at some non-government lease options or space options.
No, we can absolutely do that.
So is there, Just a question. Is there any advantage to going into a government space? Is the rent equivalent to a non-governmental space, or is the rent similar? Because you were saying, you know, it was $1.50 to $2 square foot, I think is what you were saying. Is there any benefit?
You know, that until we, I think,
Right.
actually look at particular properties, it's going to be hard to say. But and I don't want to, I guess, $2 I think a square foot is probably more like the going rate. But we could certainly go out and see what other options are out there, either in the unincorporated area or in the city of Chico, and compare that to the old municipal building and bring that back. Certainly not looking for a definitive decision today. We're looking for more some guidance, and we're happy to go out and see what other options might be out there that might be better fits. Maybe they're already configured, maybe they're less costly, but we're happy to do that.
So is this building, would somebody come, since PG&E is going to be still sending out the bills, is somebody coming to you know, pay a bill there, or is that still going to happen at the PG&E office? I mean, what kind of, you know, interaction is going to occur at this place?
Yeah, the bills will still be going to PG&E, so I wouldn't envision, and this is where I'll look to Gary and Sean to correct me if I screw this up, but obviously you have 6 or 7 staff. Even the call center staff should be doing most of their work telephonically with customers, but I imagine if we had a call center here locally that could drive some customers coming in with some sort of questions, but ideally it should not. I don't believe this should be a facility that has a tremendous amount of customer foot traffic.
Yeah,
Okay.
for this is Gary again. For a CCA of this size, once you get off and running, you might anticipate maybe a handful of people coming in during a day, maybe not even that many. It would be mostly your marketing and your customer service reps that are developing programs that would be housed there, and your executive director and his staff.
Well, I like the idea of it being in a government center, just to give people the feeling that, you know, that this is part of government, or, you know, it's not some fly-by-night kind of thing, because I think it's going to take people a while to get used to the idea of BCEA. So having it housed in a government center, I think, gives it a good appearance. What would really do it for me, though, is if there was some kind of price break where we would get a better deal than, say, we would get in a commercial space. Then I could see it being really a nice deal for BCEA. Otherwise, you know, it's possible with COVID-19 that there's going to be a lot of spaces coming on the market, you know, due to businesses going out, unfortunately. So, you know, that's my 2 cents worth. So do you guys have enough direction to go out there and figure it out? Bring something back? Is that the idea? Bring back some options for the board to look at?
I think so. If the board is agreeable to having us, obviously the OMB is one. We can certainly get more into the weeds on the pros and cons and the cost of that, but we can also go and look in the private sector as well if that's the board's direction. I think it is.
And Brian, if I may, or Madam Chair, if I may, the other thing we discussed was the possibility that if the timing aligns, we may want to hire the CEO so that he or she can also be, you know, part of that final lease discussion. So all of this is sort of designed to be done sort of in parallel and come together. So based on what Brian and Eric find out, there may be an opportunity to bring the CEO on board and then pretty quickly have a lease signed thereafter.
Okay. So does that, do all the board members feel heard on their positions?
Works for me.
Alex? And Doug?
Well, I think, you know, getting the full cost with the parking from the city of Chico, and then having a commercial realtor, you know, provide a list of available spaces, and have that ready for when the CEO comes on board might be prudent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
We
so
will do that.
you got enough direction there?
We do.
All right. So we can then move on. We don't really need a vote on that. So item C, adopt a resolution approving delegation of authority to Chief Executive Officer for regulatory and legislative matters. You're requesting us to adopt the resolution adopting a policy to delegate authority to the Chief Interim Executive Officer on regulatory and legislative matters impacting BCEA mission and operations. Do we have to read that resolution?
No. Well, you should have read it, but you don't have to read it out loud.
That's what I meant. Read it out loud. That's what I meant. I did read it. I just didn't know if I had to read it out loud.
Yeah, no, you don't have to read it out loud.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So, first of all, is there any discussion by the board about the resolution?
I just wondered, as I was reading through it, I wondered how often that situation comes up. Maybe Gary could speak to that. How often would we anticipate that the CEO is making decisions, needing to make them quickly and not take them to the board?
Yeah, when this typically comes up either from something that happens in San Francisco or Sacramento, and what will happen, typically Cal CCA will bird dog the PUC activity in the legislative session, and they'll see a bill come up or they'll see a policy coming out of the PUC which they feel strongly about one way or the other, and they will want to take a position fairly quickly on whatever that issue happens to be. And they'll muster up a call with the CCA directors or CEOs and say, here's the issue, here's what the Cal CCA wants to do, are you in favor of that? And so the frequency would be a function of how much activity there is at the PUC and the legislature, but they could easily have a call a week on something like this and seek policy direction on a new directive from the PUC or something coming out of a bill from the legislature.
Okay, so once a week would not be unusual.
No, yeah, that would be, maybe not that much. It might be 2 or 3 1 week and not anything for a month, but I'd say once a week on average probably isn't a bad number.
Okay, thank you.
And with the understanding that the CEO is going to confer with the chair of the board or the vice chair in the chair's absence on any kind of letter or position that we would take as one of the, I think there were 6 or 7 points, something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the fifth point on there, definitely.
Okay. All right, so I would entertain a motion.
Should we open up public? Is there any?
Was there any public comment?
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask for public comment. Ashley, have we received any public comment on this item?
No, we have not.
Okay, seeing and hearing no public comment, I would entertain a motion. Alex?
Move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in, oh, I guess we can't do it that way. Ashley, could you call the roll, please?
Director Brown?
Aye.
Director Huber?
Yes.
Director Teeter?
Yes.
Chair Lambert, or Chair Lucero?
Yes.
My apologies, Deborah.
Hey, they both start with L. It's okay. All right. Moving on to item D, then. The motion passes. We'll move on to item D, policy discussion regarding communities wishing to join BCEA. The requested action is to receive information and provide necessary direction.
Okay, so yeah, this item was it's an interesting one just with regards to the timing of things. And what we asked Gary's firm to put something together here for us, just at least prompt some discussion with the board. And from my perspective, I think this is a good model that could be followed right now. I think this is something that likely will evolve over time. Right now, the county and the city are the two entities that are footing the bill to get this entity and organization up and running. If another entity wished to join now, I think it makes sense to have that entity also participate and bear some of those costs, some of that risk associated with getting the entity off the ground. There's also some other additional costs that will be incurred by that entity to have some of their data, their load data analyzed. They'll have to file a new implementation plan. So there's some other hard costs that they'll have to expend as well. Once the entity gets up and running, and these costs, frankly, are all paid back to the existing entities, maybe then this policy changes where there's just a lump sum buy-in fee, where I think some entities are out there $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 is kind of a buy-in fee for a new entity. But right now, I think this kind of approach makes sense, just given the fact, given the fiscal times that the city and the county and everyone's facing right now. So if another entity wished to join now, we would support some sort of a buy-in here. And like, for example, this scenario, this used Orville, for example, but they're based upon their load data, a percentage of in comparison to the county and the city, it'd be about a $90,000 buy-in plus $10,000 for costs. So they'd be around $100,000, and again, those costs would be recouped and paid back. Now, on the flip side of this argument is obviously if something is too expensive or too much, then there's always that risk of some entities not wanting to join the CCA. So with that, and then the other things are, I think from a board perspective, is just making sure that there's a synergy and there's the goals of the organization are in line with the goals of any organization that wants to join the CCA. So those are some things that we that Gary's team put into this policy, and certainly just looking for any additional feedback, input, discussion on this. And Gary, I'm not sure if I covered everything there, but if I missed anything, by all means.
I think that was a good recap. And like you say, there's two ways to look at this. One, an existing CCA that's got its loans paid for, has money in the bank. Maybe you just look at getting incremental costs from a new member. For a new startup picking up a member, the thought is that maybe the new member should have as much skin in the game as the existing members, and that's where the $90,000 from Oroville, as an example, would come from.
Is there a way, if a city, as you say, Brian, with everybody's finances being the way it is there a way to build a formula into paying this back over a period of time? It doesn't have to be a buy-in right away. We could, because I think I like the idea of the startup costs being shared on a percentage basis. I'm just wondering how an entity would pay for it if everyone's faced with the same situation right now.
Yeah, it's going to certainly be some challenging times ahead, and that's one of the hurdles, I think, with having something that's finite like this. But certainly, what could be done, and I'll look for some council discussion on this potentially. But if we have a draft policy, and then if we have an entity that comes up and says, we can do A, B, C, and D within your policy, but we can't check all of the boxes. Would we have some flexibility there then this policy is something we're trying to use as a standard, but would there be flexibility to deviate from that if the board felt the time was appropriate?
How do the other board members feel about this? Any ideas? Alex?
Nothing particular to contribute.
Scott?
I like knowing that the communities who want to join us have some skin in the game. I'm not married to that $100,000 or $90,000 number, but you have to start somewhere. So yeah, I think it's yeah, like I said, I think it's an indication of how committed and how serious a community is to joining us.
Doug?
I kind of like the footnote, and that the third-party financing being secured. So I vote for the footnote.
The footnote, I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow which footnote.
Bottom of page 3.
Staff, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, the thought there is that if you already have your financing lined up, cash flow isn't an option, and maybe you don't need to have skin in the game from a new participant. You would just have them pick up the incremental out-of-pocket cost, which would be getting their load data, running through the pro formas, and file an amended implementation plan. And that'd be the $25,000 to $35,000. But of course, we don't have that yet for BCEA. We don't have long-term financing lined up. But if, like for instance, example, Oroville wanted to wait till we did get all of our credit established and cash flow wasn't such a problem, there would be justification, I think, to reduce it from the $100,000 down to $25,000 or $30,000.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the buy-in. As board member Huber stated, the skin in the game, I think, is valuable and demonstrates that commitment.
However, on the other hand, you know, isn't it more beneficial for us to have more communities involved in our BCEA because that gives us more buying power? Is that true, Gary? One of the things that we'll do if somebody joins, regardless of which method you go with, is to run the pro formas with and without the new member, and that will tell us if you two are better off or worse off by adding a member, and that would probably weigh into your decision about whether you want them to join, and if so, what the buy-in would be. So at this point, we don't really know those answers.
No, we don't.
But we will before making that decision?
Yes, if you, let's say Oroville wanted to join, first thing we do is get an updated set of load data from PG&E and run it through the pro formas with and without them and see what the net difference is on the city and the county. And at that point, you'd have a metric about whether you're better off or worse off by adding a member.
I think we need that information before we can make this decision, in my mind.
If I may, this is Sean Marshall. I see where you're going with that in terms of, that analysis. The problem is that there's some logistics that get in the way. So I'll just, in general, will say that most CCAs up and down the state that have expanded service have done so because there has been a net benefit to adding customer load. Of course, you have to look at the load analysis, so you do have to do your homework. But in general, it has come back more favorable because you're spreading the more customer base over which to spread your fixed costs. Some of that will be, there'll be more information that comes from sort of current market conditions, the PCIA fee, and all of that. But in general, it's been a positive thing. And the problem is that in order to do the updated pro forma, you've got to have the city of Oroville, in this case, approve the release of their load data and approve, an agreement to move forward. So it becomes a little bit chicken and the egg.
Yeah, I agree with Sean for the most part. The exception would be if you picked up a member whose load data was such that power costs were more than what they would have been without them, because of the load characteristics they have. And like I said, you don't know that until you actually do the math on it.
Well, what would be the pleasure of the board here on this one? We are giving, I'm trying to scroll back to my agenda. do we need to just give direction or actually approve something here?
What was the recommendation? Yeah, I guess I want to know the same thing.
Yeah.
Was there a recommendation, or just looking for our input?
And this was going to be a discussion.
Because it sounds like you're trying to establish a policy that would effectively work for everyone, but based on what Gary said, it's possible it wouldn't work for everyone. You almost have to do the homework first to find out. And so I guess your question is, do we have a solid policy that it's the same, we treat everybody the same, or do we, as a young BCEA, flex a little bit and maybe go with the footnote as Supervisor Teeter suggested until we're up and running?
Yeah,
Chair, I have a question when you're ready.
If I can,
sure.
this just real quickly, the intent here was to have discussion and we bring a actual policy back for adoption at the next meeting. So all of this discussion is great. So that way it's going to help us formulate how that policy is shaped and presented to you at the next meeting. But Supervisor
Hey, Brian,
Teeter.
this is Doug. Refresh my memory that the seed money from Chico and the county, that will ultimately get paid back when we get long-term financing?
Actually, it's not when we get long-term financing. It'll get paid back once the long-term financing and our seed money starts to be repaid. So once we launch, it's typically, what's typical has been about 2 years, and those dollars have been repaid back to the entities 2 years after launch. 18 months, 24 months is.
If, like, say, Oroville joins and puts, skin in the game, they'd ultimately get that back as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I think it's kind of indifferent then. I don't know if they have cash lying around. I doubt they do. I'm curious from our experts, Oroville has a larger manufacturing base, and typically to those high energy consumption manufacturing type companies, are those benefits to the CCA, or are those typically a wash or a negative?
Typically, big commercial and industrial customers help the financial feasibility.
Yeah.
Because you think of Roplast out there, just, they consume a lot of energy to make their plastic products. So I guess, I don't know. I guess if they're going to get the money back, but I just don't see them having the money to join in. So, yeah.
That's why I was saying, Doug, is there a way that that if we set a certain fee, that they would receive back a certain fee based on, when we become fluid? I don't know how other CCAs do it, but because of the times we're in, I think it gives a different twist to all of this. So we might need to be a little more creative in how we have people join and how they are repaid back. So we take a certain fee to help offset the cost of startup costs, irregardless, and then a payback concept.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we're committed to the startup costs, and that's why I think the footnote's good, since we're going to get the money back. We being the county and the city, just charging them for the performa and implementation plan, because I don't think we're getting reimbursed for those costs. And so that's why I just kind of like the footnote. In the long run,
No, I could go either way.
I do
see
like that. Yeah.
Maybe set it up where their buy-in's going to be whatever your out-of-pocket is to determine whether it's financially beneficial to have them join, which would be that probably $10,000, do the math and get the load data. And then once you determine whether it's beneficial or not beneficial to have them in, you could set the entry fee once you know what the impacts on YouTube would be.
Oh, I like that idea.
Right, and
Yeah,
the
that's
other thing
nice.
is to make sure that, Brian, I know is gonna follow up on this. The one thing you don't wanna do is lose a potential new member, if they can't afford the buy-in fee. So I
Sure.
think it sounds like going in the direction of possibly phasing the fee, and that sounds like it could be promising for both entities.
So what I'm hearing is
Scott,
some.
you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
Did Scott want to say something that sounded like he had something to say?
No, that's, I think what Gary suggested seems like the prudent way to move forward.
I would agree with that. What about
I'm
you,
supportive
Alex?
of that as well.
Doug, can you go with that?
How about, for clarity, if Gary can reiterate what he said? Because it sounded good, but I just want to make sure I understand it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to defer after I talk to BBK and see whether what we're talking about matches up with what the JPA agreement says. But technically, what we could do is to say, if you want to come in, we have to have money to get your load data from PG&E and rerun the pro formas, and just throw a number out. That's probably $10,000. And so they put that money up. We run the numbers, decide whether you two are better off or worse off by picking up a new member. And then given the outcome of that math, you could set the entry fee accordingly.
If that's legal, that sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, so I think.
Yeah, this is Ryan. This is Ryan Barron. I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, either do I.
Good. That sounds like the way to go then. All right, do you guys
Sounds
have
good.
enough direction? Do we need to take a vote, or is it just simply direction?
This is direction. It will come back to you next month.
Okay.
Yep,
All
it's
right.
clear.
All right. Is that good with the entire board then? We're good to move on to the next item?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I'm flipping back here. Okay, so we are on board member and staff announcements. Does anybody have anything for the good of the board or the public? All right, hearing none, then we would move into closed session. Does our attorney read us into closed session at this point?
Yes, I will do that. So the board is going into the closed sessions that are described on the agenda, which is conference with labor negotiators regarding the CEO position. We are not anticipating any announcement at the end of the meeting, but we will announce whether there were any, whether there was any action that was taken by the board that needs to be reported at that time. So with that, the board should move on to the other meeting agenda that was sent out to you separately.
Okay, and that was a separate contact number. Does everybody on the board have that?
I have the link for the Zoom meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what you need.
Okay,
Yes, got it.
I clicked. This is
Doug, do
Doug.
you
I
have
clicked the Zoom, and it said it was not a valid address, so I'm gonna just dial in.
Okay, well, it may have just been early. You might try it again.
I'll keep plugging away on it then. Should I also
Okay.
do the dial in just in case?
I'm trying to right now. So I think I just got in with that link, so it's up to you if you wanna, how you wanna come in.
Maybe because I'm on my tablet. Anyway, I'll be there.
Okay, so we will adjourn from the main chamber here. We're gonna go back into a separate conference room, but we'll keep this meeting open until we conclude closed session. Okay, this is Brian. We just concluded closed session, and there's nothing that needs to be reported out, and the meeting is now adjourned.